Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Game, Develop, Repeat. I'm your host, Chris, and in today's episode, we are talking about Subnautica. We're going to use this game as a metaphor for a conversation about limitations and about sort of developing skills gradually and pushing your limits repeatedly until you kind of grow your limits. We're going to talk about some gameplay mechanics in this game. I'm not going to spoil anything in any significant way. I'm just going to talk about how cool the mechanics are. We're not going to talk about specific enemies or things you discover or anything like that, because this is a game that I am jealous of people who have not played it yet because they get to experience it for the first time, and I never get to have that again. This game consumed me the first time I played it. It is a marvelous, marvelous experience. Having said all that, let's dive straight in. Subnautica is primarily a game about exploration and discovery, which is one of the reasons why I feel it's such a fitting metaphor for a conversation about learning new skills and taking on big projects and seeing what you can do with them, seeing what you can make, seeing how far you can push it, because this is a game where every step along the way, you are pushing it. You are constantly in this state of tension. You are always trying to push your limits. And sometimes you can take a minute. You can sit back. You can look at what you've done so far, look at what you've accomplished so far, and then you're like, okay, I got to get back to pushing it because this is just too cool and I want to see what's next. I want to get there. I want to find out what's next. Short sales pitch for the game, I guess. The kind of the what is this game on the back of the box, right? Not that we still have those. It is a survival game with resource management, blah, blah, blah. You crash land on an alien planet in the water, and you have to survive, and you have to go around and kind of figure out what went wrong and figure out how you're going to survive this and how you can get back to your own homeworld, I guess, or your own people, and not just be stuck on this planet. It's cool. It's got great humor behind it. It's got incredible things to discover, and we will leave it there as far as that. Oh, there's some crafting too. It is definitely a game with crafting mechanics. That is a huge element of this game, which we're not actually going to be focusing on too much for the sake of this conversation, but the crafting is a significant chunk of the game. It doesn't really create the whole game feel, oddly enough, at least for me. When I play Subnautica, I don't feel like, oh, I'm going to make a cool base, I'm going to do all this cool stuff, right? Like, it's not like a Minecraft or Valheim thing where I'm like, what can I build? Instead, it's like, how can these buildings serve my greater purpose within the game? It doesn't pull me in a base building direction, if that makes sense. It pulls me in a utilitarian base direction where I'm like, okay, this base is for this base is for that, so on and so on. Now, the mechanics I want to talk about within this game, specifically, there's one mechanic I really want to focus on, and that is the oxygen and the drowning, right? You have a certain amount of oxygen at the beginning of the game, so you can only dive so deep. And as you progress through the game, you, of course, figure out ways to dive deeper and stay underwater longer, and so on. And the way they've implemented this mechanic is very juicy. It feels good. It feels you can really push it to the limit. You can really reach this point where you're like, oh God, I'm about to drown. And I listened to a breakdown about this. I think it might have been from a Game Maker's Toolkit video, but it was a long time ago and I don't remember who it was. And they were talking about one specific detail of this mechanic, which was that you can, how do I put this? You can really almost drown. Like, this isn't a situation of meter hits zero, instantly dead. There's a little bit of buffer, and it can feel like you think you've actually drowned and then maybe you've survived, right? Like, there's just enough buffer there where you're like, oh my God, I made it. I actually survived that. That's crazy. Not much, but it's just enough to give you that little extra feeling of, whoa, I can't believe that I pulled that off. And this mechanic is such a cool tool for exploration because it is a hard limit. It sets a hard limit, and you can fool yourself into thinking that you don't have this hard limit. You can fool yourself. You can go, "Oh, I can make it. I've still got 15 seconds of oxygen. I can make it this much further." And then you're like, "Wait, I've already used up 15 seconds of oxygen and I had to go through this whole thing. So, unless I have some clever way or sorry, I've already used up half my oxygen, and let's just use percentages because I don't remember the actual numbers. You're like, I've used up half my oxygen. And you look at the meter and you're like, yeah, but I've got a lot left. But you're not thinking about the fact that you took a straight line to where you are, and you've got to go either straight back the way you came from, or you have to find a better, more efficient path, or you're just going to drown. Right? It's got that tension. As soon as you start recognizing that, and maybe you get lost in some underwater cave and you're like, uh-oh, and you start to panic, it's incredible. It's got some incredible tension just through this one beautifully executed mechanic tied to the thrill of exploring this world. There's the constant feeling of there's something cool around the corner. There's something cool around the corner. What's over here? What's over there? What happens if I go here, right? There's always the little mini goals. And sometimes you can really put yourself in a trap by pushing a little too hard. So then you've got to prepare, and you've got to do all this stuff to make sure that you're ready for the situation that you're about to get yourself into. And something about that in and of itself is deeply compelling. That tension. I'm always talking about the like emotional impact that a game has. The tension that Subnautica builds has such a great impact. It has such strong pivots between tension and relief. It has this huge spectrum of like intensity and then release, and then tension and release, and tension and release. And then within that, there's also just the excitement of discovery. So when you're not experiencing the super high tension and release, you have other stuff to do too. And it's good, man. It's a good game. And I can't dive so deep into every single detail that makes it such a satisfying experience. You know what's a shame is I haven't played the sequel yet. I got to play that sequel at some point, but I haven't played the sequel yet. It's like got an Arctic theme to it. So I am talking about the original Subnautica, not the sequel, which is called Below Zero. I just haven't tried it out. But yeah, it's what else do I need to say about this? What else do I need to say in order to frame this discussion? So just to relate this to what I'm going to talk about later, the exploring and discovering stuff I think is super important to notice in this. Like the tension and release is great, but the exploring and discovering new stuff and the passion and excitement for seeing what's around the corner is a really, really important thing to note for the conversation that we are going to have right now. So what about this relates to game development, to the game development journey? What about this game is instructive in terms of learning new skills and moving forward and discovering new stuff and all of this good stuff? I mean, first off, it's a masterclass in game design, right? You can just play this game and go, wow, they have nailed this mechanic. It's beautiful. It's just brilliant. And you can kind of adapt it to your own needs. Like each player is going to push as hard as they want to. It's great. It's such a good mechanic. So there's that, right? Now let's talk about it in terms of the journey of a game developer, right? You're learning to develop games. When you first start, and this is learning any skill, when you first start, you don't have much oxygen, right? You don't have a lot of tolerance. You're not you're not really able to just dive super, super deep, right? Day one, you are not going in deep on like C++ source code or something. No. Day one, you're going, how do I navigate the window of this freaking engine? I don't understand this whatsoever. But if you find something in day one that makes you go, oh, that's interesting, or like, oh, that's exciting. If there's something you're looking for, if there's something you're searching for, and you find a hint about it, or you think it's just around the corner, you're going to get out of there. You're going to come up for oxygen. You're going to let your brain rest for a second, and you're going to go back in, and you're going to go, oh, I'm that much closer. Oh, there it is. And you're going to find it, and you're going to bring it back with you, take a rest, go back in again, right? The learning process is a lot like trying not to drown in Subnautica. Because if you stay down there too long, if you slam your head against the wall, which is something that I have a long history of doing, I'm very familiar with this. Don't slam your head against the wall. If you do the slamming your head against the wall thing where you just stay down there and you just stay focused on this thing without giving yourself a little moment to kind of breathe and let it digest, you're going to burn out on learning this thing, and you're going to say, it's too hard. I can't learn this. It's too difficult. It's just because you didn't, give yourself that little bit of space. Now, I'm not saying this is difficult, walk away from it, right? That's not what we're doing in Subnautica, right? We're going, this is difficult, but I'm excited about what's around that corner. So I'm going to take a breath so I don't drown in this, and then I'm going to come back because I've got to see what's around that corner. I want to know. I want to get there. I want to get further along. And in the game, your motivation is, all right, how am I going to get off of this planet? In real life, I don't know what your motivation is. Maybe your motivation is, I want to make a cool game. And that seems like a tool for me. And that does too. And that does too. You got to get excited about each one of these little, you don't have to. We all have our own method, right? For me, I feel like I have to get excited about each one of these little skills that I'm picking up along the way. Each one of these little things that just makes the journey a little easier next time, shows me, oh, this is a trick that I can use to get even further into this. This is another trick I can use to get even better at this. That's the excitement in like the earlier phases. And then you reach a point where you're going, okay, now the excitement is building a base. In Subnautica, I never got that excited about building bases. I don't know why. I just didn't. I kind of did. It never really landed for me. In game development, once you're past this survival phase, right, and you're still going to be picking up and learning cool things all along the way, right? You're still going to run into cool little things and weird things everywhere. I mean, you will never know everything about game development. No way, right? You'll never know everything about anything. But as you get to this point where you're comfortable, you're confident that you're not going to drown in it, right? You've reached this point where you're like, I'm not going to quit because something was hard. I'm committed enough to this. It's difficult, and I go, okay, well, I'll just come back tomorrow. It'll be fine, right? You'll reach that point. Then you can start focusing on the creative a little bit more, right? Like maybe you step away from that. You go, okay, that's kind of frustrating. I don't actually need that tool right now to build the next part of my game. I'm going to build a little bit more and then come back to that. So you have stuff to do in the meantime if you're getting too stuck on something. And that can turn into procrastination, but also it can be handy. That's a balance we all got to strike on our own, right? I love this metaphor. I'm going to tie it to one other thing here. Are any of you into weightlifting? Does anybody here like weightlifting? I really like lifting weights. I'm not, guy who's been lifting for his whole life or anything. I'm not particularly strong, but I love lifting weights. And you cannot train 7 days a week. You cannot be in the gym every single day, all day, right? You have to have rest day or you're going to burn out completely. You're going to injure yourself. It's going to be a mess. Kind of the same thing again as like the Subnautica oxygen thing. I realize I might be stretching the metaphor a little bit, but if you're not taking a moment to recover your oxygen, you're going to drown. If you're not taking a moment for your body to recover in weightlifting, you're going to break it. You're going to injure yourself. If you're not taking a moment for your brain to recover, and I mean even just physically recover, that exhaustion you feel physically after you have been programming for too long, or after you have just been grinding so hard on one thing for like way too long, there's an exhaustion in your head. There's a physical sensation of, I've been working on that problem way too much. And then you're like, I don't know what it is for you, but for me sometimes it's like I need sugar. I'm like, I need something like I had heard something about chess players needing like a specific kind of sugary snack because it's some kind of metabolism thing. I have no idea. I'm not even going to try to replicate whatever that information was, but it was something involving sugar. And so now I use that as an excuse to eat as much sugar as I want when my brain is tired. I think maybe I'm just finding excuses to eat candy on that one. I think that's exactly what's happening. But anyway, at some point you gotta rest, right? That's what we're getting to with this. And then you discover more stuff, right? You don't just say, I'm tired, I'm gonna rest, and then you go, okay, I'll just rest here forever. You could open up Subnautica and you could just chill at the top and be like, well, I'm not running out of oxygen, so I'm never gonna drown, so it's fine, right? But then it's not fun. Like, what are you doing? What's the point? Why are you here? Exit out of Subnautica. Don't like that's not. You're not resting. You're just chilling. Like there's a big difference between resting and chilling, and I think it's easy to mistake. It's easy to need rest and then say no. That would just be chilling. Right? It's easy to need rest, to need to take a moment for yourself and go, no, I can't do that. I can't do that because then I'm going to not be making progress. No, you're making progress. You're making progress by giving yourself time. Not making progress is drowning, right? Making progress is giving yourself a minute and then going back and giving yourself a minute and going back, right? I think any more on this, I'm probably going to beat the point to death a little bit. Subnautica, though, God, I recommend it. I recommend it as just a beautiful game. It's also beautiful. That's the other element of it. It's also just like a very enjoyable visual experience. I quite like it. I have one more point to make before we go to the final section of the show. Why is the final section of this show called repeat, right? This show is divided into the game, the develop, and the repeat chunks. I've named the last section repeat because I want this podcast to be about making everything sustainable, making everything repeatable, making this whole game development thing something that we want to do for the rest of our lives. And I think sometimes you have to sacrifice the short term for the long term in that pursuit. Sometimes you have to go, I am taking a minute for myself so that I can make this in the long term, right? Sometimes you have to go, okay, I'm going to lose out on this for this week because it's too much and it's going to burn me out and I have to look at the long term. It is very important to hear that and know that is a specific circumstance and is not just, I'm not feeling it today. I'm not feeling it today is something that starts happening every day. And then before you know it, you're not actually working on game development anymore, right? I think those are very different. I have a little bit of trouble managing that, and I tend to end up leaning too hard in one direction or the other, right? So it's important to like keep an eye on that, I guess. And the final analogy here is ego lifting. This is why I brought up weightlifting a bit ago. When you ego lift, you're saying I can do this even though you can't, right? You're saying I can bench 250 even though normally you bench like 145. I mean, people don't go that crazy, but you're saying you can bench 50 pounds more than you can. And what happens when you do that is you put yourself at a really high risk for injury. In game development, I think there is an equivalent to ego lifting. And I think when you ego lift in the game dev sense, you put yourself at risk for quitting permanently. I think you put yourself at risk for like a mental injury, a point in your brain where you go, this is too hard, this is too intense, this is too crazy, I can't do this. How does anybody do this? I'll never be able to make what I want to make, right? It's too exhausting, I'm done, I'm out, right? That is, I think, what happens. I think there's different versions of that and so on and so on, but like trying to make an MMO as your first game, that's ego lifting. Trying to make a huge scale JRPG with like this incredible art assets and storyline and music and all this stuff as a solo developer with no help from the outside as your first game, you're ego lifting, man. You're walking into the gym, you're putting 4 plates on the bench and you're going, I'm a pretty strong dude, I can handle it. And you've never done bench press before in your life, right? You don't do it. You just don't do it. Just take your time. Take a small project. Start there. You don't need to be the strongest guy in the gym day one. You don't need to be the most productive game developer in the world day one. You're not going to make an MMO. Nobody made an MMO day one, right? No disrespect to people who want to do that. That's great. And no disrespect to people who want to squat 500 pounds on their first day. That's great. You're not going to do it. If you do that, you will put yourself in a hospital. The squatting one, not the game dev one. Like you literally just won't be able to do it. And like if you try too hard, you'll potentially die. So don't, and it's fine, and then work towards it. And then just enjoy the journey, right? It's not about the end state. And I think the problem that we run into is we look at it and we go, yeah, well, it's the long-term journey of making an MMO. But the skill you're developing here is not making one big project. It's not a lifelong skill of finishing this one game. It's the skill of making a game, making a game, making a game over and over and over, right? Those are your individual lifts. That's your weight. Your weight is each game that you're making. Or the metaphor breaks apart a little bit. But there's a bunch of individual skills that you're developing, and you're going to have a weak point in there, and you're not going to be able to train that weak point until you've made something smaller first. That's what I'm getting at. Okay, let's wrap this thing up. I've been going on for too long. I've got 2 questions for us this week. The first question that I came up with is, what are the signs that you are exhausted? I've got a few signs for this. Most of them are like physical weight in my body, like my brain will feel heavy, or like my head, I guess, my head and neck. My arms will feel heavy. I will have the urge to just not move. I will just not want to move at all. That's a big one for me physically. There's also some mental ones that are not necessarily like full exhaustion, but just like, oh, you need to take a little break, right? Things like getting stuck in a loop, or like feeling very pessimistic about something, or like stuck on something. Those are signs to me that it's like, okay, take a minute, walk away, come back, and then you're good, right? You'll recover real quick, right? And then just like urge to sleep, like desperate need for sleep. That's a different kind of exhaustion. That's just got to get more sleep. I think that's a big part of that one. That's how it is for me. You may be totally different. I think one of the ones that's interesting to me is like a physical exhaustion in my head. Like if I work on code really aggressively for a long time, there's like a sensation that I get that's not just like, oh, I'm kind of tired. It feels like I'm physically tired, like in my brain. Is that a universal experience or not? I don't know. Coding feels like a physical mental drain, right? It's an interesting sensation. Next question that we've got here. What are the excuses that you use when you're totally fine but just don't want to work? For me, it's a lot of, oh, I already got so much done this week. That's one of my go-tos. It's like, oh, I've gotten so much done already. It's been so productive. I don't even have to put in more work. Okay. And then if I dig deeper, sometimes it's just, oh, I just don't want to because it's nice out today. I think these excuses all come down to like a core thing of like, oh, I kind of just don't want to. Like, I'm not exhausted. I just like, I don't want to work today. And that's that. And then when that feeling comes around, you kind of, there's a moment where you go, okay, but we're going to, right? I think those are the most important days to go, okay, but we're going to. The day when you're not exhausted, but you're kind of like fooling yourself into, oh, I just can't work today. I'm just so, I just can't work. I don't know what it is. I'm just not feeling it. The mood is wrong. I'm not inspired. I don't have an idea. Those are the most important days to just do it anyway. Because then, like, then you can do it anyway, right? There you go. It's fine. That's what I think. I think I pulled that a little bit from Healthy Gamer GG. I think he had something about that. I think that's pulled just a little bit from there, but I don't remember what the specific video was. But I think that's what like that thought is inspired by. Also, I want to give credit where it's due. This episode is largely inspired by a video by Renaissance Periodization, which is a weightlifting channel. I'll explain that a little bit. That'll make sense in a second. I forgot to update you on my game development for this week. And we're going to do that, and we'll tie it into the Renaissance Periodization thing, and then we'll wrap the whole thing up. Update for this week. I was working on pixel art this week, and it was hard. It was really hard. It was really exhausting. Pixel art is the skill for me. Art in general, visual art, is the stuff that I look at and like I have a deep rooted feeling of not being able to do it. And so it takes a lot more effort to fight that feeling or to like work through it and get past it. Because I don't have a tradition, I don't have a history of being good at art or drawing or any of that stuff. It's never been in my wheelhouse, so it's hard to break that belief and recognize that it is something that I'm capable of learning. And so, partially for that and for other reasons, and just not having very fundamental skills, when I started working on the pixel art, I needed to come up for air, so to speak, Subnautica again, every like 2 hours. In contrast, when I work on code, I can just code for 8 hours. It's fine. Working on pixel art is like 2 hours, take a breather. Another hour, take a breather. Every chance I get, take a breather. It was weirdly exhausting. Partially because I was trying to find footing. I was just trying to find a home base. I was trying to find a spot that I can start from and like stay at. And it was getting a little better as I went, but I was also like feeling harder and harder to do. I was relying a lot on willpower. It was a lot. It was a lot. And so this week was like extra exhausting for the amount of hours that I was putting in. And then I also overtrained a little bit in terms of physical stuff because we had nice weather all of a sudden. And I ran partially because I was just avoiding work. I ran after doing a leg workout, which was a terrible decision, and it destroyed me. Still managed to get some work in that night. But anyway, the point I'm getting at is my development this week was a rocky week, and that's why we're talking about coming up for air, because it helps me justify my rocky week. It helps me look at my rocky week and go, oh, that's not so bad. It's okay, you know? Sometimes you gotta like take a breather. Sometimes you gotta let go a little bit because you're working on something extra hard, right? And I am sacrificing hours this week. I'm not doing the full 40. I'm subtracting 13 hours because that's where I ended up after pushing as hard as I felt I could. And the reason that I ended up doing this is because of a Renaissance Periodization video. It's a YouTube channel that is like deep scientific dives into weightlifting stuff, right? It's good stuff. Dude is a little intense, but the information is really good, and I just found the channel. I like it so far. There was a bit there about rest days. He was talking about rest days, and one of the things that this guy mentioned, I think his name is Dr. Mike Isatel, probably pronounced his last name wrong. He mentioned that a lot of people, when they're working out, they will work out like 6 days a week or whatever, and on their rest day, they will work really hard on something else. So they won't take a real, true rest day. They will work so hard on working out every day. They're stressing their body and they're doing all this physiological stuff to themselves and adding all this stress. And then when they have a rest day, they are continuing to stress themselves out aggressively, just in a different way. And I then realized that I am not currently giving myself a true rest day, right? I'm not, any day that I'm not lifting, I'm working hard on game dev. Any day that I'm, like, if I'm not working hard on game dev, I'm doing the podcast or I'm lifting or I'm doing something, right? I don't at this moment have a true rest day. And I went, oh. And then I started thinking about that and I thought about coming up for air, and then Subnautica episode, boom, here we go. I wanted to cover Subnautica anyway. So the tip this week is to respect the importance of a true rest day and to notice how exhausted you are, because some guy who's way smarter than me made a video, way more informed than me too, made a video about rest days, and I was like, oh my God, that's a really good point. Right? He was like, there's physiological changes that are happening when you're stressed out, and you need a day where you're not adding a ton of stress, right? Doesn't matter if it's what kind of stress, where the stress is coming from, it's still making changes in your body, apparently. That's the general feeling that I got from that. So I can't just push super, super hard every single day. There has to be a true rest day, and that is tomorrow. I could technically get all my hours in this week. It's not happening because I need a rest day and I need a reset, and that's that. And I just have to be okay with it. That's a short-term sacrifice for a long-term payoff to set myself up for success. There you go. Now, the challenge for myself is to do that, to take a true rest day, and to do it the following week too, or as close to a true rest day as I possibly can. I'm recording this episode a day earlier than I usually would so that I don't have any obligations on Sunday, so I can just do whatever and just breathe. That'll be nice, won't it? No workout, no game dev, no nothing, just a day, just to breathe. And then Monday I come back to it and I go, oh, here we go. Because I had a breakthrough on the pixel art stuff this week. I reached a point, I was suffering and like struggling and pushing myself and just hands and feet just trying to find ways to get myself to keep working on pixel art. And I finally reached a point where I went, oh, that's the style. And then it came in a moment of desperation. I got to tell you this. I'm sorry. I was done. I was exhausted. I had just overworked out. I had just overtrained a bunch of stuff. And then I was like, okay, if I were to do some work right now, if I were able to get myself to work, what would that work look like? And I gradually rolled that into, I'm just going to make a whole bunch of visual drafts of the hero for this game. That's what I'm willing to do. That is still pretty productive. I'm going to just quantity over quality draft this hero over and over and over and over. And pretty quickly, I found a style that I really like. I was like, oh, wait, there it is. That's something that I'm excited about. Now I have that little thing that I can be excited about. I dove deep in Subnautica. I turned a corner. I saw something, and I looked at my oxygen meter, and I went, oh, God, I need air or I'm going to drown, but I'm coming back here. And I left. I'm getting oxygen this weekend, and then come Monday, I'm coming back down there and I'm exploring that style, and I'm excited about it now. I'm ending the week on excitement and looking forward to exploring this thing. Finally, there's something in pixel art that I'm looking forward to exploring for this game, because man, it has been hard. It has been a rough little chunk of time. Just, I know it's a week, right? But a week working on the thing that you're struggling the most with can be weirdly brutal. And this week was weirdly brutal. And I mean that in the most, somebody who's good at this would look at the week I just did and go, oh, whatever, man. But I'm lifting weights for the first time. And to me, that 5-pound dumbbell is a car. I am just struggling to lift it, and it's taking everything out of me because I'm learning a new thing. And learning a new thing is hard. and you got to respect it. You can't just go in there and go, yeah, no, it'll be fine. Let me just lift the heaviest one in the gym. You can't do it. You're not ready for it. It'll break you. So I've got to respect the fact that I'm just not there, and I got to give myself a little bit more time to recover. So that's it for this week. That's everything I've got for you. I hope that was enjoyable for you. I will talk to you in the next one. Have a good week. Get out there, make some stuff, and have fun with it. I will see you next time.